We know how much he loves us, John writes. We're in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16. It says, we know how much God loves us, and we have put our trust in his love. We just cracked it open on the second half of that sentence, which has to do with we have put our trust in his love. So let's talk about trust. We talked about love. Oh my gosh, I don't know that I'd ever be able to exhaust the subject of love, although I'd begin repeating myself pretty quickly. This idea of trust, though, is there is no relationship in your life that trust doesn't come into play in it. Thin, fuzzy relationships that have not much of a connection. I would even say these are the less important relationships, although I don't, nobody is unimportant, but some relationships are less important than other relationships. Our relating, our connecting, our being together hangs to a large degree on trust. Where there is a lot of trust, the relationship, I came at it the wrong direction. There is no strong, healthy, thriving relationship without a large measure of trust. Now, what comes first? Trust or this health? The healthier a relationship gets, the more trust tends to grow, and the more trust tends to grow, the healthier a relationship tends to be. There's lots of reasons for that, and honestly, I don't know that a big, long explanation of why that is the case is going to make any difference. You know this from your own experience. One of the contexts that I see over and over again for this is in conflicted marriages. Every conflicted marriage that I've ever worked with has a gap, is lacking in trust. And one of the most challenging things to do to help a couple move through the conflict and find their best life under God's design is that they have to learn how to trust. I can't make them trust. I can't erase from their memory the things that destroyed their trust. And I can't make them see things that ought to be building their trust. I don't have any control over that. The most I have as a counselor is influence. And so what I try to do is influence people to think in terms of building trust. When trust has been broken, I think I wouldn't even know how you would quantify it, but it's easily twice as hard to build as the initial building of trust was. So let's think some about trust. Trust, I have a friend that says their trust is on several levels. One is on just it's my gift to you. I trust you. I grant you trust. This is valid until you break trust. But until you break trust, I grant it to you. I also trust you. And the reason I grant it to you is just on the basis of your personhood. A second reason has to do with your competency. I observe your competency, and because of your competency, I trust you. And, oh, by the way, My level of trust has to do with your level of competency. They're very connected. The one of the difficulties with that particular thing is that there are times when some people are very capable, but the system is holding them hostage. And so now think in terms of business and a corporate setting, this trust being released on the basis of a person's competency it's a tricky thing. And then the last is on the basis of character. What I observe of your character, that gives me, what do I say? On the basis of that, I release trust to you. If your character seems deep, I will release you deep character. If it seems shallow, I'll release shallow trust to you. Now, I don't have a good measuring stick for character. And part of the reason for that is all of us are looking for different things to a degree when we measure someone's character. And then there are things about people we can't know. Recently, it came to light that someone that I thought had marvelous character had a very long-standing pattern of dishonesty, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, things that were so inconsistent with his public persona. And to make it worse, he was a Christian. Ravi Zacharias and his ministry that he built and that seemed to be pretty supremely blessed and favored by God is now taking it on the chin, because what we didn't see was the part of his character that only God saw. Well, God and Ravi. Well, I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to fix the fact or change the fact that you can only know so much about my character. You really are only going to know as much as I let you in on. So those three things, I grant you trust because of you're a person. I just do that. I grant it to you on the basis of what I observe of your competency, and I grant it to you on the basis of what I discern of your character. Now, in relationships, that's kind of I think that's pretty good corporate schema for thinking about trust in a team or corporate setting. I think it's basically true on all the different lower levels down to the individual relationship, but it's applied differently. One of the things that is essentially the same, regardless of what layer or level you're thinking in and talking about, has to do with you'll never be able to separate trust from risk. This is a very hard thing. In my counseling with conflicted couples, and it seems like these days more and more I'm working with conflicted couples, in order to build trust, once trust has been broken, in order to rebuild trust, it takes a big risk. Because the one who's been offended by the broken trust, they are naturally not interested in releasing trust again. And sometimes they tell me, ever. I get that, sort of. To me, it's a reasonable human response on one side. On the other side, what it does is you keep yourself you're limiting yourself from experiencing a a relationship that could become healthy. The only way it will become healthy is if the offender demonstrates that if they prove that they are trustworthy and rebuild trust. Here's the deal. The offended one has to take the risk that they will be disappointed again by the one who broke trust. Okay, I could go on quite a lot longer in terms of in a marriage relationship, this whole trust and risk thing. Let's look at our relationship with God. My relationship with God, my trust of Him has a direct relationship to how clearly I am convinced that He loves me. There's this relationship there. If I am a little convinced, then I have a little trust. If I am greatly convinced, I have great trust. I've already confessed to you that trust is an area I'm very weak in, and God is dealing with me on that in my life, seems like every day. In fact, there are a lot of days my prayer is, God, lay off. But He won't, because He wants me to grow a greater trust in Him. Trust and faith, in terms of theology, are so closely connected. I don't know that you could pull them apart and say, well, this is faith and this is trust and this is how they differ. I don't know how they differ. They seem two words for the same thing. Trust. When I trust God, what that means is I release and take a risk on the basis of my belief in His reliability. And John sets this in a real specific kind of context where he says, we know how much God loves us. And because of that, we put our trust in His love. We risk it. No risk it, no biscuit. That's really true in terms of growing faith. We put our trust in His love. Now, I don't think that means the only thing that we trust is God's love. No, I think that in this relationship, one of the primary things that we put our trust in is His love. Now, quickly, let's think about that phrase. We put our trust in His love. We put our trust. That is a phrase of intention. You rarely accidentally put something somewhere. Now, there are times I put something somewhere and I can't remember where I put it when I need to find it again. Thankfully, that generally doesn't happen in terms of putting our faith in God's love. But to put our faith in God's love, I believe, has to do with our intention. We mean to. And, here's another thing I notice in my life. It may not be true for you, but it is for me. If you've ever had a little puppy, you put them where they should be, and they'll move. And then you put them where they should be, and they move. You put them and you put them, and you put them, and you put them. That's the same thing with an 18-month-old baby, right? You put them, and you have to re-put them, and you have to re-put them. That's true of my trust. I have to put my trust and keep putting my trust in God's love. I struggle with this, and my trust, as I've said, is small and weak. I'm heartened by thinking of a story of Jesus. He comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and the apostles that had not gone, the three that had gone with Jesus up were Peter, James, and John. The rest of the apostles were down below, and they brought a boy to him who was demon possessed. And they said, we've tried and we can't cast the demon out. Jesus looks at the dad and he says, do you believe I can do this? And the dad basically says, if you will, yes, you can. And Jesus says, if I can. And the dad says, I believe. Help my unbelief. And there's me. There's my biography in a sentence. I believe. Help my unbelief. I don't think that's a prayer that God takes lightly. He didn't with this dad because Jesus healed the boy. And I think he works that way in our lives too. So my challenge is put your faith, put your trust in God's love. Put it there. Remind yourself. Forcefully put your trust in God's love today. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.